Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Sunday gathering, guys. It's good to have you guys this morning. Thank you so much for joining me. I've already been watching you guys in the chat just a little bit here, and I've got a few topics. I've got the topics that were up at the top, so we don't have to worry about that. I will mention those, and now I see a couple new ones. So first, let me say welcome to all you guys. Let's see, who all have we got? We have Julie Patchouli, Writing Truth and Wisdom, Annie O, Julia Thomas. It's good to see you guys this morning. Naomi Anderson, Jimmy Davidson, Rick Bowser. Thank you guys so much for joining. Laura D, Stacia, Dan Free, Perusia, and Westwind and Tanda. It's good to see all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining. So let me get these last two topics that I see here in the chat. Don't want to miss any of these. I've got Naomi. You're asking about 1 Corinthians 15:51. So let me put that there. All right. And then Julie Patchouli say, can I please explain binding and loosing? Yeah, I got that one already. So we're good there. All right. Well, I hope you guys had a great week. I had another busy week, but I was able to get the Dracula video out. That was cool. It's funny too, after a lot of work on the Dracula material, a lot of reading, a lot of research, I got done with the video. I'm like, wow, it was 15 minutes, which isn't bad necessarily. It's just funny that it was a shorter video as compared to some of the ones that I've done. Yeah, that was a fun one. That was fun for me. All right, Jackie Blue, it's good to see you. Sherry Fennel, the Red Raven, good morning to all of you guys. MK Ryan, good to see you. MK Ryan, you asked a question. I want to get that. Let's see. How'd you say this? He said, your question is, why did none of the early church fathers write about living during the millennial reign? That's a really good question. So I guess all I can say is, let's do that one. Okay, let's do that one. I don't want to give anything away right now, but let's do that one. I think it's a good question to talk about. There's some new material, interesting material that I can mention when we talk about that. So that'll be a good one. Thank you, MK. Kelsey, good morning to you. Dan Free, I see you say, in view of the resurrection, should we choose a burial in the ground or does it not matter? After all, Jesus' body has also disappeared, so it could be linked to the resurrection. Well, Dan, I answered this question just like a couple weeks ago. So let me get the link to that real quick. And then I'll just give you that link in the chat so that you can check that one out. Because, like I said, we just did that topic, so it's no big deal. But I'll just give you that link so you can hit that little section, and I'll try to link you to the specific time code, so you go straight to the section on cremation versus burial. Let's see if I can. Man, that was recent. I don't think I put it in the title, so hold on. Let me just look here. Looking. I'll show you guys on my screen, I guess, while I'm looking, so you can at least see what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm just trying to find on my website which one of these did we talk about burial. It was within the last few weeks, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm going to be frustrated if I can't find it, that's for sure. Oh, there we go. Okay, here it is. Man, it was way back. It was a lot further back than I thought. April 7th live stream was when we did that. So let me click here and you can see the first link here will take us, and I'll put that in the chat for you, Dan Free. So hope that helps you. But I won't take extra time this morning because we have done that one so recently. So there you go, Dan. No problem at all. That's what we're here for, is just to learn together. Yeah, Julia, the time flies, I guess, doesn't it? Man. Yeah, I was surprised that it was April that we did that. Man, seems like yesterday. All right. Well, let's see, guys. I've got quite a few topics already because you guys got started early on me. So let's see. Oops, I turn that off. Let's see. What have I got? How many have I got? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 topics right now. So if there's anything else, any other topics, go ahead and mention them because they may dovetail in with what we're talking about, or I may be able to squeeze them in quickly, and we'll do the best we can. But we'll go ahead and get started with some announcements. So as you guys always know, I'm here every week on the live stream, but my channel is pretty big now. I mean, as far as number of videos or content, I have over 500 videos probably that you can watch with different research material being talked about in each one. But each week on the live stream, we do these topics. I take them from you live. I have no real prior, knowledge of the topics you're going to pick. We go at them live. We do the best we can, and we talk in the chat. That's what you guys bring to the table. Is you talk with each other. You talk with me. You help me sometimes, and I help you. So that's what we do here every week, and we try to be as consistent as possible. But as long as we can stay civil in the chat, we'll have no problems whatsoever. But if there's belligerence that we can't tolerate, or if there's spam, I will delete that. So this should be good. Just be aware that as my screen shows on the top left, you can see I have a website, and that website is a curator. It's got everything that I do on there. I try to keep it up to date. I'm doing a very good job recently of keeping it very up to date. So if you have any questions about things I've done, or you want to try to look through the stuff, my website's a really good place to do that. I'm on many platforms. I want to make sure that you're aware of the platforms I'm on in case you're new. Let's show this on the screen so you can see this. But as it shows on the front page of my website, I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Rumble, Truth, X, and Telegram. You can find me on all those platforms. Of course, my main focuses are mostly on YouTube and Facebook. Those are the main places that I touch people each week. But I do put notifications and stuff on all the other platforms, so you will be able to reach me on those as well. Just be aware that I have this Bible application, and you're going to see me using it in the live stream today as we go to Bible verses. It just is a really helpful tool that I built, and you can access if you want to go to it and sign up. You can click here on the website, and it takes you to the application itself. I'm already logged in, but you will have the opportunity to sign in or register. And if you do register, I will give you a free membership for a time period, and I can extend those out. If anyone has a membership that has expired, I can extend that out. I just need to know. I don't want to randomly, spam people with email about, their expiring memberships or anything like that. So at this point, because there's no cost involved, just let me know and I can re-up your membership. But then also I have another channel that is called SciCry, and if you click here on my website, you can see where that channel is hosted. I am on Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, Telegram, Truth, and X. And these are videos that I started doing on YouTube, but then got quickly banned because of the content material in these videos, exploring some of the more conspiratorial topics that are out there, some of the revelations that we're seeing in different places at the current time period. I typically have an interesting focus that I like to explore, and that is some of the secret messages that are revealed in movies. For instance, the top few videos here, the most recent ones are the Moana movie from Disney, the Godzilla movie series that's been out in the last few years, just different things like that. But there's a lot of variety here too, if you're interested in that. All right, so with that, let's talk a little bit about what I've been doing this week. as far as my research and all that stuff, you know, of course, the Dracula Unmasked took a lot of my time making sure I got that video finished and got it out there, and I was really happy to do that. So that one's out, and that was a real fun one to do. I've gotten a lot of good response from that too. I think a lot of people just, you know, people that are interested in Dracula or whatever are coming and seeing the video and, you know, finding out new things, or, you know, even making comments that are helpful for me. This week, also, it's going to be coming out probably this afternoon or evening. I'm going to release a testimony I got from one of my viewers. And she is an ex-Mormon, and she was gracious enough to spend time with me giving her testimony to me. It's kind of a life testimony, but there's a really amazing set of circumstances and God revealing himself to this lady during her life that really changed the course of things for her. And of course, she's you know, a Christian now, and so happy with where things have gone, the things God has done for her. So that testimony is going to come out probably this afternoon or evening. I'll release that video. That's going to be a good one. And then also, I forgot to mention this last week, but let me share with you real quickly. Those of you who are using the application or are interested in this at all, I added, the week before, I added 2 new writings to the application, so you can now search them, you can cross-reference them, all that kind of stuff. And those 2 writings are the Christian Sibyllines, which is a early Christian, well, it's not Christian actually. The writings are pre-Christ. So, but the Sibyllines were passed around amongst the Christians at the time of Christ, so they call them the Christian Sibyllines. They were prophetic writings that came out in the BC years before Christ, and they're very amazing, the things they talk about. They definitely link Rome to the prophecy fulfillments that were coming at the time of Christ. So this dovetailed into my study for the Cataclysm of Rome series, and I just found these so interesting and helpful that I wanted them in the tool so I could cross-reference them. So the Christian Sibyllines are here, and then the other thing I added was the second apocalypse of John. And this is also, it's called by a number of names. I've mentioned it to you guys before, but it's also the revelation of John. Sometimes it's the apocalyptic revelation of John. Sometimes it's called the second apocalypse of John. I kind of went with that title because it differentiates it a good bit from the book of Revelation in the Bible. I didn't want people to get confused. So I liked that title. But anyway, this is here, and it's very interesting. This is a revelation, supposedly. Now, again, the copies we have of this are very late. They seem to point to a very early text, but we don't know for sure. Nobody knows for sure. But this writing talks about the end of the world. It talks about what will happen when the great white throne judgment occurs and how that will occur, every single detail. So it's a very interesting writing. Again, I wanted it in my tool so that I could search and read and research this thing. So anyway, I wanted to make sure to let you guys know those things have been added. So they are available to you. If you have a membership, which again is free, you can register for that, and then you can look into these books as well. And by the way, all these books in this tool, by the way, you don't have to use my tool to read these books. I found all of these online, okay? These books are all online somewhere. The good thing about the tool is I've amassed them all in one place. And the list is by no means exhaustive. So as time goes on, I will continue adding books to this so that, again, it broadens my research base, and at the same time, it can help you. So I hope that's something that is interesting to some of you guys and that you can use. All right, so let's see what you guys are talking about. Thank you, West Wind, for the comment on the Dracula video. Yeah, yeah, no problem whatsoever. It was fun to do. Good morning, Squiffy Bear. 5022 Freedom. Did I say good morning to Perusia? Linda Connor, good to see you. All right. I think that's everybody. All right. Well, then I think we're about ready. Yes, Julie Patchouli, the membership is free. If that's, let's see here. I want to see, is that super unclear on the website? I may need to change this thing. When you're logged out, you see this. You see become a member. You click. Oh yeah, I do still have the notice about the $10 a month. Yeah, I had originally thought I would charge for this. That may still happen in the future for a membership, but for now it's actually still free. Um, yeah, that's tricky. I'll change that later today so that I make it clear what's going on right now. I haven't changed that in a long time. That's my bad. All right. It's free for you guys, okay? When I see you join, I go ahead and I make it available to you. So, all right. Let's see. So let's get started. Let's start with prayer, as we always do. If you have requests, please make them known right now in the chat. I will take those requests and I take them to our Bible Scribe prayer channel on Facebook, and then we do pray for those throughout the week. So please get your requests in the chat, or praises, of course. And let's go ahead and bow our heads and pray. Lord God, I thank you so much for this day, for this time, for the ability to do what I'm doing, and the strength you give me to do it. I thank you for each of the people here today that are joining the live stream. Please bless and guide each and every one of us in our search for you, for more knowledge about you, for the truth of what's going on in our world, perhaps, or what's in the scriptures. Lord, just help us to nail down things. Give us the insight, the guidance to do so, just to understand better every day, because, Lord, we want to be closer to you. That's the only thing we want. And it's in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, that we pray these things. Amen. Thank you, guys. All right. I guess it's about time. Now, Nick Debs, you popped in there, and I see you did mention, you mentioned your thing from last week. So let's do that. I have that in my notes already because I knew you may be here. You may want to do it. Let's do that. Add that to our list for today. Get that on here. All right. Now let me show the title, or the let me show the topics we've got so far. There they are. A little small because there's quite a few now. There's 7. Julie Patchouli, you were asking about binding and loosing in Matthew 16. Writing Truth and Wisdom about the role of the Holy Spirit after 70 AD, post the 1,000 years, and even now. And then Annie O asking about 1 Corinthians 15:29 and the being baptized for the dead, so to speak. And then Julia Thomas, you asked, do I think that possibly, because figures like Dracula had been smeared in history, do you think the same is true of the royals? It's a good question. Naomi Anderson, you mentioned 1 Corinthians 15:51. 1 Corinthians is apparently very popular today, chapter 15. When he says, we will not all die but be changed, and why is it considered a mystery? And then MK Ryan, why did none of the early church fathers write about living during the millennial reign? And then Nick Debs, your question from last week on Romans 11:25, the partial hardening until the fullness of the Gentiles. All God's promises to Abraham, David, fulfilled in 70 AD. Okay, we'll go into some of that stuff. Okay, so let's order these. Quite a couple of these, at least a few of these, are based on Bible scripture lookups. Julia Thomas, your question on the royals, I may move to the top because I think it'll just be a quick discussion we can have, and I'll just do the best I can, and then we'll probably move on. Writing Truth and Wisdom, I really like your topic, the role of the Holy Spirit after 70 AD. Let's see, where does that fit here? Baptized for the dead. We'll sit and all die and be changed. We'll stick those two together. I think Oh, goodness. Okay, wait. That was wrong. So MK Ryan, yours kind of then leads into the Holy Spirit question because of some of the things I'm going to bring to that. Then Nick Debs, I don't want to do yours last. Let's see. Because you were from last week. Yours was from last week. Let's do that one as the first of the Bible exploration questions. Okay. I think this is a good order. Okay, so let's do it this way. And let me get the first topic on the screen, and that would be Julia Thomas. And you ask kind of in this way, have the royals been smeared in history? Like Dracula, so to speak. Okay. All right. So this will be one where I just kind of freeform and talk about it. I won't really look anything up here, Julia, but just to give you my thoughts on that question. So Dracula, we have to remember that the reason Vlad the Impaler, which he didn't even, that wasn't his name, it was Vlad Tepes, or Vlad Dracula, meaning the son of Dracul, who was his father. He was smeared for a specific reason. Okay, he was smeared by the ruling class. The ruling class, again, just like in our time, the media is controlled by the rulers, in America for sure, and in many parts of the world. The media controlled by the rulers. So the rulers decide a certain type of propaganda needs to go out. They use their levers of dissemination in the media to get it out. Now, in the case of Dracula, the rulers of the time, who were the rulers of that time period? Of course, they were still vying for control, but it was the Catholic Church. It was the papacy. Now, we're talking about the, what was it, the 1400s? I think it was the 1400s that Vlad was alive and active, and this whole story takes place. So the 15th century, it was about the papacy trying to get control, wrangle control, and keep it of all of Europe. Okay. And so they put out the notice that Vlad the Impaler was evil. He was a tyrant from the devil. They changed and made it sound like he was the dragon. He was the devil because he was a Christian trying to protect his own lands and protect the sovereignty of Wallachia against the encroachment of the Catholic papacy-backed armies of Islam and Hungarians. And so Vlad did everything, and he was, by the way, as far as geography, he was cornered. Wallachia was cornered, sandwiched between Hungary and Transylvania was controlled by the Saxons, who were also in league with the Catholic Church. And then you had Islam coming up from the south. So it was sandwiched. And this is why Dracula is a hero now to the Romanians, because he tried to stem the tides of all that. And yes, there were probably some pretty violent things he did. I think most of the stories were very exaggerated, from what I can tell. Very exaggerated. His name, Vlad the Impaler, according to the actual records, there was only 2 times that occurred, and it wasn't that many people that were impaled. So the stories of the controlled media of the Vatican, and they had just, by the way, invented the movable type printing press. Gutenberg brought out his printing press at this time, and then those stories were reprinted and sent all over that area. So you see in that case, the ruling class of the papacy using its propaganda wing, the media, to publish smear campaigns against Dracula, okay, who was a national hero of that area because of what he did, trying to stem the tides against Christianity, sovereignty. So that's what you see there. Now, when we come to the modern age and we look at the royals, now I think that you're asking that because I think at the present time, like right now in the last year or so or two, there's a lot of people smearing the royals, right? Well, really, that's not the media. The media is not smearing the royals. The ruling class is not smearing the royals. Okay, so it's a quite different thing than when the ruling class of the papacy was smearing Dracula. Okay, what we're seeing now is throughout history, the royals have been built up and propagandized to the masses. So the royals in Europe are seen as wonderful people. You know, the media does a good job of getting support for the royal family. They play out the actions of the royal family like a soap opera on stage, so you are endeared to them and you feel connected to them, even though those people wouldn't walk on the same dirt that you walk on. They despise the common man. The royals are not good people in general. Now, of course, like any group of people, there are some good and bad eggs. For instance, I do think Princess Diana did her best with the hand she was dealt, knowing nothing coming into the royal family, knowing nothing about any of that. You know, just rather an innocent girl from a higher class family that got involved in something she didn't know what she was getting involved in. Got swept in for the ride, so to speak. But in the same way, the media picked her up and carried her along as far as the whole royal narrative. But no, I don't think that the royals of today have been smeared by anyone except the people who are now seeing the lies that they have been involved in for centuries. So I think there's a difference there. I think that is quite different than what happened with Dracula. Does that make sense? That's my take on it. I mean, I have to be honest. That's my opinion on all of that. Stacia, you feel that Diana was selected for a reason? Yeah, that could be 100% true. Good morning to all you guys filtering in. It's good to see you. Let's see. Trying to make sure I don't miss any of your comments here. Yeah, Tanda, I see your topic from last week. So I'll tack it on the end and see if we can get to it, okay? I'm sorry about that. All right, so I think with that being said, I think that we'll move on from the royals. So Nick Debs, Romans 11:25, the partial hardening and the fullness of the Gentiles. Let's see if we can do this one. This one will take a little digging. Now that we're starting to get now into the Bible, so we'll open it up and see where we can go. Now you said in this topic, you said partial hardening, the fullness of the Gentiles, the concept that all God's promises to Abraham and David were fulfilled in 70 AD. An extra clarity to your question, is there still some mass unveiling in the future for today's unbelieving Israel? And is it because the number of the Gentiles isn't complete yet and it's some future event? Okay, that's good. So let's go to, we'll put it on the screen. Let's go to Romans 11:25. Romans chapter 11. Yes, okay. So the verse itself, 11:25, is, "For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in." All right. So the question is really, what is that blindness maybe? How long is it? And when is this that the fullness of the Gentiles will have come in? That's a good question. That's a good question. Now, this does stem from a conversation he's having. So let's go back up here and just brief ourselves on what is being talked about. Now, the whole tenor of this chapter, we start at verse 1 there, it says it right off the bat. I say then, God cast away his people, meaning Israel? He says, God forbid. Now, this is Paul, of course, so he's the Gentile missionary, right? He's not one of the 12 disciples, okay? So remember that. Now, the 12 disciples were 12, the 12 tribes of Israel. They went to the Jews. Jesus sent them to the Jews. So Paul was commissioned by Christ to go to the Gentiles. Okay, so it's totally different as far as his focus. But he's answering this question, has God cast away Israel? No, forbid it. That's not true. He hasn't cast Israel away. For I, he says, I'm also an Israelite, seed of Abraham, tribe of Benjamin. So Paul himself saying, yeah, I'm an Israelite. God has not cast away his people, which he foreknew. Now, he goes on, he says, even at this present time, there's also a remnant of Israelites that trusted God, that accepted Christ, a remnant of good ones, okay? So this is the way he says in which God has not cast off Israel. He is saving the remnant that is true to him, right? He continues, and he's explaining this again to non-Israelis, to Gentiles. And he's saying, down here is the part about the branches, the wild olive branches that are grafted in. Now that is Paul talking to the Gentiles saying, look, you're grafted into the whole thing that's going on with Israel. You're grafted into the kingdom. Where does he start with that? Because I like that section. I want to read that. If the fall, this is interesting in verse 12, if the fall of Israel is the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? Oh, that's a really thick verse, really thick. He says, let their eyes be darkened that they may not see, their bow and bow down their back always. Wow. Okay. I'm learning here too. Not that I haven't read this before, but sometimes you come with a new perspective and you see things, right? David said, this is going back now to Psalms, and I should cross-reference this verse so I know exactly where it's coming from. David said, let their table be made a snare and a trap and a stumbling block and a recompense unto them. Now, when he says let their table, he may be talking about the table and the showbread. He may be talking about the implements of the law. Maybe he's saying, David is saying in that prophecy, let their adherence to the law be made a snare and a trap and a stumbling block for them. Now, that makes sense because the wicked Israelis were doing all the practices of their religion, all the practices in the law, but God said in the prophets, I despise your feasts and your sacrifices because they had become wicked. They were also worshiping pagan gods in the darkness and keeping idols and what are the names of those? Teraphim, those little idols they would keep with them in their pockets and stuff like that and worship. So he says, let their eyes be darkened that they may not see, and bow down their back always. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid. Not that they should fall, but rather that through their fall, salvation comes to the Gentiles. Oh my gosh. Do you see the power of that? That through the fall of the wicked Israelis, that salvation comes to the Gentiles. They see it. They understand. That's part of why the judgment against Israel had to happen, was so the world could see that they, those Israelis had become wicked. And what is the price for turning against God, right? What's the price? So if he says then those verses, if their fall is the riches of the world and they're diminishing the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness, meaning the saved remnant, their fullness is also an example of God's grace, right? That he did save the ones that were true, okay? For I speak to you Gentiles, he says, as much as I'm the apostle of the Gentiles. Okay, so it goes on. This is just such good, this is such good scripture, such good stuff. And this is the part about the branches. This is good too. If the branches are broken off, meaning parts of the Israeli people are broken off, meaning the wicked ones are sent off, and you, the Gentiles, being a wild olive tree, are grafted in among them, and with them you partake of the root and the fatness of the olive tree. Okay? So you partake in all the blessings that are appropriate for the children of Israel, essentially. Boast not again. This is probably why the modern Jews, or even the Jews of that time, were so hateful of Christianity. So hateful, because as this passage is saying, and if they could destroy this passage and delete it from history, they probably would. It's because of the fall of the Jews, the Israelis, that the Gentiles were shown the way. Okay. But he says to the Gentiles, he says, don't boast against the branches. Don't boast against Israel. So this is good for us to hear too. Don't rail against Israel, but if you boast, you bear not the root, but the root bears you. So he's saying, you are grafted into this. Don't rail against it, even though there's wicked Israelis. And you can take that to today. It's like, we shouldn't gloat or whatever over the Jews who, the majority of the modern Jews are secular. The ruling class of Jews are wicked. They're evil. So we shouldn't boast against that, but we should recognize it. And we also recognize what God did for Israel. He did save a remnant of them. So it says that you would say then, the Gentiles, you would say that the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in. Well, he says because of unbelief they were broken off. Those Israelis that were broken off and ejected from the promises were wicked. They were unbelieving. They didn't believe in God and Christ. And you stand by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. So again, don't boast. Don't be high-minded about this stuff. Don't take it and gloat. Don't get a big head about it. Just be high-minded about it. Be in fear of what God can do and who he is. For if God spared not the natural branches, meaning the Israelis, he didn't spare the wicked Israelis. Take heed, because he may not spare you if you are wicked, right? He won't spare you if you're wicked. So these are all good warnings and good things to know. I'm sorry, I'm going through this whole passage, but this is all important. Behold the goodness and severity of God. All right, we're getting down now. If you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these which were the natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? He's even saying that he can fix the Jews. He can fix the Israelis if they come back. Okay, he can graft them back in. Do you see the power of God? He can do anything he wants with the situation based on the belief or the unbelief, the wickedness. All right. So this is why I wanted to do that though. This 11:25, Nick Debs. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery. Now, what mystery? Well, pretty much the mystery he just told you all about. Lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles would become in. And so as all Israel shall be saved, as is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer and turn away ungodliness from Jacob. This is my covenant to them when I shall take away their sins. Etc., etc. Let's see if there's anything else. I'm skimming here to make sure there's nothing that also talks back to what we just talked about. God has concluded them all in unbelief, that he might have mercy upon all. Okay. The depths, the wisdom and knowledge of God. can't search it. We can't understand it. All right. Okay. So the blindness is clear. He mentions it up top. Let their eyes be darkened that they may not see, and bow down their back always. Let their laws, their rules be a snare and a trap to them. That's the blindness that we're talking about. And we did see that. We saw it both in the New Testament, all through the writings, where these Pharisees and heretical Jews who abandoned God, really, they only were keeping the laws as an outward form of visibility. And then in the darkness, they were worshiping pagan gods. So they were definitely blinded during that time. And so the question is kind of like, does that continue past, for instance, 70 AD, when God judged Israel? It's possible. It's possible. I guess what I'd have to say here is that I'm 100% not sure, Nick Debs, as to whether this blindness and the fullness of the Gentiles. Let me see something let me see if I can dig that word out of the Greek in a couple places and see if it's used again, the pleroma of the Gentiles. Let's see, Ephesians 1:10. For the administration of the fullness of the times, that's different. But it's the same word, but it's not the same thing. It's not the fullness of the Gentiles. Some teachers, some Christian scholars or pastors will say that kind of a thing. The fullness of the times is the same as the fullness of the Gentiles. They get it all mixed up. I just don't agree with that stuff. I think they're just making things up because they don't know. That is it. 18 occurrences. I missed some. Yeah, there's a few down here. I just don't think it's ever mentioned again in another context, another way. So let's see, like if I do fullness of the Gentiles, what do I get? 6 results. And they're none of them. Well, here's Luke 21:24. So let's look at that real quick. Luke 21:24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword. And this is the Olivet Discourse, by the way. They shall fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. I guess, there's 2 ways you could think about this. That this times of the Gentiles is either time boxed into that time period, which I think that I have generally, most recently in the last few years, I have felt that this times of the Gentiles was time boxed into the time between Christ's coming and his second coming in 70 AD, if you will. Second, I hate using that term, second coming, but his coming in the clouds in 70 AD. I have felt generally that is what was meant by the times of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled, meaning Jerusalem would be trodden down. Now, but that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Because if this says that Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles is fulfilled. Now, wow, this kind of dovetails into another topic we're going to talk about in a minute. It kind of makes a little sense to think, well, that Israelis and Jews would be blinded until the times of the Gentiles was fulfilled. And that time, as this verse states, started at the time when Jerusalem was trodden down by the Gentiles. When was that? 70 AD is when the Gentiles trod down the city of Jerusalem. They destroyed the temple completely, razed it to the ground, and then much of the city was burned and just demolished into rubble. And so that seems to be, according to the way this verse says. Now I'm just thinking through this with you. That seems to be the start of the times of the Gentiles. So, if the start of the times of the Gentiles was 70 AD, what is the time frame during which that would be fulfilled? Meaning Gentiles would come into the kingdom. Okay, Gentiles would be brought into the kingdom. Now, I guess my mind immediately goes to all of the history up till now. We still are having Gentiles by the thousands come into the kingdom of Christ. Sometimes easier, sometimes more difficultly. But Jerusalem is still under Gentile control. Jerusalem is still trodden by Gentiles. And so it's tough for me to know exactly what, if this is a statement that just simply encompasses like future history, that Jerusalem will be trodden down by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is completely fulfilled. Well, it's interesting too to think, and things are coming to my head as we're talking, so I'm just going to say them. This is all just me bloviating, trying to figure this out with you. If Israel had a time, there was a time of Israel. Now, there's in a lot of the ancient writings, as I read through a lot of that stuff, I started to call there was a 12 segmented time period in history that was called the age of the Jews, the age of Israel. And then that was supposed to be changed by the Messiah to the age of Messiah. Okay? So if there was a time of Israel, and then Messiah comes, and then now it's the time of the Gentiles, he did his work with the nation of Israel, and then in judging Israel in 70 AD, he started the time of the Gentiles. Could it be that we're in the time of the Gentiles now still? And I'm saying that, and that is different than what I've kind of thought for the last few years. I haven't really spent a lot of time on this topic either, but I'm just kind of telling you what's coming in through my brain as I'm reading these passages and thinking more about this. What are you guys saying? What are you thinking? Let me see here. Third Advent, you said you agree. Man, you guys are going at it. Let's see here. Tomcat, you mentioned some verses there. I don't know the relevance. Yeah, not boasting, I think, is maybe what we're talking about there. Let me see. Nick Debs, you got some things. You said, yeah, the time between 30 and 70 AD. And let's see. It's where you started going too. It's a very hard verse. Yeah, it is a pretty hard verse. And so alone, I think it's harder than when we go through the passage. You understand what he's talking about in general. He's talking about the Jews versus what's going to happen with the Gentiles. And so he mentions this fullness of the Gentiles. Now, the only thing I can think in my head when he says the fullness or completeness, pleroma of the Gentiles is, I'm thinking this is God's opportunity to get as many Gentiles into the kingdom as possible. He did it with the Israelis, with Israel, and then he had to judge the wicked ones, and he brought the remnant in. But now is it perhaps that this is the time when as many Gentiles as possible will come to God before the end, okay? And so I feel like that's probably a good assessment of these verses. Let me see if there was any other results that mentioned kind of the fullness of Gentiles. I don't know that there were. I mean, you do hear these people like in 2 Timothy here, it's talking about that they want to make preaching fully known that all the Gentiles may hear. And so what you see after this time in history and in the early church and early Christians is they're going out like wildfire to all the Gentile nations. They go up through Europe and they're going down into Africa. The Berbers come to Christ. The Saxons, not Saxons necessarily, but I'm just saying that area, the Germanic peoples, even all the way over to France and Spain, or what we call France and Spain, the Franks and the Lombards. I mean, so many Gentile groups were turned to Christ at that time. And it was due to the missionaries that came out of this apostolic teaching. It wasn't the Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church then started to fight against all that. That's another story. So yeah, I think that this is something to continue thinking about. Now, again, I just want to reiterate, all the Christians that came in the centuries after Christ were talking about reaching the Gentiles. Now that I'm reading this, I'm remembering some of the things I've read, reaching the Gentiles. And so that's just interesting. It's interesting. Let me skim down through your comments, guys, and see if I'm missing anything from y'all. Let's see. Rick Bowser, you think that we're on the right track here? That's good. That's good. I mean, I'm just thinking through it. Like I said, I had previously just thought that the fullness of the Gentiles was the ones that came in the time period before 70 AD along with the Jews. But I think that seems wrong in light of Luke 21:24. Okay. I think that feels wrong. Nick, you asked, because this is your question, you asked, is there some special thing to happen to the nation of Israel after the fullness? But you feel like that doesn't make sense if there's no more Jew nor Greek. Yeah, I don't know, Nick. I think I'm reaching the limits of my understanding. Like, I would want to research more in the early church writings to see if there's more talk of this, and this is one of those things that if I can scrape together time, I'm going to spend more time doing it. You see, I've been adding some books to my lookup tool here, but some of those writings, like the writings of the early church fathers, are very prolific. There's tons of them. Like, I don't know if you guys realize that. Most Christians don't. There's probably more early church writings than there is, like, if you put the New Testament back to back like 10 times. There's that much of it. So it's just a lot to go through. I want to spend more time going through it and then cross-referencing it with these things in the Bible. That's what this tool is built for. But, I just want to get there. It's just a matter of time and effort. Anyway, I think I think some of those nuggets exist in the early church writings. I just haven't found all of them yet. I do think they exist. Joyce Bippus, you say this is all speaking of the past. The end of that age was already Armageddon. I mean, like I said, Joyce, you may be right. I had felt that way for a long time, but I do question that a little bit, because I guess one of the reasons is, do the Israelites, if any of the current modern day Jews are actual descendants from Israel, do they seem blinded? They do seem blinded. One of the things that stuck out to me in the passage as we were reading, where it says, let their eyes be darkened that they may not see, and bow down their back always. I had this image in my head of a hunched over Jewish person with a long nose. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. That just came to my brain. My brain works in mysterious ways. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know, Joyce and Robert, you felt the Gentile fullness ended on the last day, or perhaps, which is the last day? That word last is sometimes used in multiple contexts for multiple last days. Okay, so that's a hard one. Nick Debs, you're going to ponder on it a little more, and you'll shoot me an email with some more thoughts. That sounds perfect, Nick. Thank you for bringing the topic. This is very difficult. Very difficult. Some of these little nuggets these little threads that we pull on, by the way, in some of these live streams are really difficult things, really tough things. That's why they haven't had good answers for a very long time. And, maybe in this case, we're not coming to really good answers, but we're trying. We're at least putting it on the table, right? So, West Wind, you said something here just now that's important too to think about. You say, after the temple was destroyed, wasn't Israel also wiped out, as in genealogies, etc.? So no more genealogy. I don't know, West Wind. Like, to me, that's a possibility. It's one that. So here's the one problem I see with that. That right after the time of 70 AD, we have early Christians writing about the Jews in their time, that there were still Jews. Okay. They mentioned the things they were doing, that they were very upset about. Of course, the temple. They mentioned that they were changing the Hebrew scriptures to take out references that seemed to be Christian. So any prophecies that seemed to point to Jesus Christ, they were trying to change those at the time. We have, I think, Julius Africanus. No, what is it? Oh, I hate it when I blank on a name. I want to say Justin Martyr, but it was one of the earlier church fathers. I remember them saying those exact things, that there were still Jews, and they were very sour, of course, and they were trying to change all their writings and be sneaky, right? So that to me means that there were still Jews that were considered at that time, say 100 AD, 150 AD, that were descendant from the 12 tribes that were doing bad things. So I don't know. The third advent, you ask, can we trust the old manuscripts? I guess you're asking about the manuscripts for the Bible? The Hebrew manuscripts? Well, the reality is we still have copies of the Septuagint, which was written by Jews in 250 BC. So the Septuagint kind of clears up some things sometimes in the translation of the new Masoretic text that I do believe was corrupted by the Masoretes and the Jews prior to them. So, I think that with all of it together as a corpus, we can ferret out the little weasels that they added and changed in the text. I think they did change small things and then tried to just obscure the prophecies that were about Christ. I think that's what they did. They didn't just take whole portions and rewrite them. It would be too obvious. I mean, those scriptures were well known. So the way they could do it that made sense and that people would accept was by taking little bits and pieces and say, oh, we mistranslated that in the past, so it needs to be this translation. The word for virgin needs to be the word for maiden. It's not a virgin birth of Christ. That's one of the things they really pinpoint and try to change. But anyway. All right. Yeah, precurious. Who are the Jews? Do they exist today? I don't know. And do they in some form, in some lineage? Is it obscured? Have they crossbred with Khazarians? I don't know the answers to those things. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Well, I hope I at least brought out some good information there. I'm not sure I answered that question, right? So let's move on so that we have time for all these others. Julie Patchouli, you ask about binding and loosing in Matthew 16:19. Okay, let's do this now. Binding and loosing. Binding and loosing in Matthew 16:19. All right. Now, Julie, I will be 100% honest with you. I am not 100% sure right now. I've never really looked into this passage, not with any kind of intensity. So let's just go there together. Let's do this. That's how it works. That you guys give me the topics. We just got to figure them out, right? We got to do our best. All right, chapter 16 and verse 19. So let's read that. All right. So here it is. Is this Christ talking? That's what I want to know before I say it. Yes, this is Jesus Christ speaking to Peter, okay, to Simon Peter. Let's read the whole statement starting in verse 18. I say also to you, well, he says, first, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed it to you that you are the Christ. Simon had said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Flesh and blood has not revealed that to you, but my Father, which is in heaven. Also I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock will I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And then our verse 19, I will give to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever you shall bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And then he charged his disciples that they should tell no one that he was Jesus the Christ. Whew. You know, it honestly, Julie, it didn't give us too much context by reading those verses. What are you saying here? I see you say, someone told you it's the same as above, so below. I also don't know what that means. Well, the as above, so below, let's do this. As above, so below. Because we do see, by the way, in oops. Let's see. In Matthew oh, why am I so bad at this? Let's see. Matthew. Is it Matthew 6? Yeah, Matthew 6:9. The Lord's Prayer. That's what I'm trying to get to. After this manner pray ye this, our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Some people say, ooh, some people go like, ooh, this is the Bible using the as above, so below thing, right? So, and they'll say, look, the Bible was rewritten by the Freemasons. They'll say stupid stuff like that, which that's not true. So there's that. But what I wanted to do is see like the as above, so below. Let's just hit Wikipedia. It's the best I've got right now. As above, so below. The modern paraphrase, the second verse of the Emerald Tablet of, is this the Emerald Tablet of Thoth? No. Emerald Tablet or Samardine Tablet. A Hermetic text. Hermes Trismegistus, of course. Isaac Newton gave a translation of the Emerald Tablet. This is apparently Isaac Newton's translation of the Emerald Tablet. Let's read that. That's interesting. 'Tis true without line, certain and most true. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracle of only one thing. And as all things have been and arose from by one, the meditation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. The sun is its father, the moon is its mother, the wind has carried it in its belly, the earth is its nurse. The father of all perfection in the whole world is here. Its force or power is entire if it be converted into earth. Separate thou the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and again it descends to the earth and receives the force of the things superior or inferior. By this means you shall have the glory of the whole world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from you. Its force is above all force, for it vanquishes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. So the world was created. From this are and do come admirable adaptations, whereof the means is here in this. Hence I am called Hermes Trismegist, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. That which I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended. Whew, that was thick. I'm not sure that I fully understood all of that with just one reading, but saying that which is above and that which is that is like what is below and vice versa. And as all things have been It arose from the meditation of one. So all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. The sun, its father, the moon, its mother, the wind carried in its belly, the earth its nurse. Father of all perfection, the whole world is here. So this is apparently, Julie, where the as above, so below comes. So to me, it's like I would have to read this thing about 5 or 10 times, try to ascertain exactly what's being said here. But of course, this is some of the basis of the Hermetic belief system that that is prevalent in like Freemasonry and Kabbalah. The kind of dichotomy, the sun, the moon, and the balance of power, the all the stupidness that they love to focus on. Essentially, it's kind of a worship of the material universe as opposed to worship of God. Essentially, is what Hermetic belief is. It's a worship of existence, a worship of materialism. That's why Lucifer is supposedly the being of light, Satan the being of dark, and they are the two sides of the coin that the Freemasons, the Kabbalists, that they all talk about, that this points to. And they believe that you can be in either side. They believe you can do both. That they believe the balance is the God. The balance of those things is their God. It's that's complete and utter satanic philosophy. Okay, I mean that's what that is. So I don't know why I'm even talking about this now, but I see a lot of people misunderstanding the Hermetic philosophy and saying things about it that are not true. For instance, one thing, and I'm just going to mention this because there's some of you who are going to hear this, you're going to be mad at me. I'm still going to say it. A lot of people think that if the world switches from a dark ruling power to a light ruling power, that is satanic. Okay? From dark to light. I saw videos flying around this morning online about this topic. They feel that moving from a dark centered rulership in the world to a light centered rulership is part of Hermetic philosophy. That's what they want. The problem is that that's not true. That's not what they want. They want a balance of both, and they want the control over both. That's what Freemasonry, Kabbalah, the rulership, the elite of the world want, is the control of both things. They want the balance. They want the good to exist, but they want to control it. And they want their evil to exist and to be able to partake in that. They want to control that too. So if the world shifts right now and we move to something really good, you got a lot of black pill people out there that are like, that's the devil too. If we all go to something good, that's the devil. No, that would be the opposite of what they want. You see, that would mean the end of the balance between the light and the dark, the white and the black. That's what they worship. They worship this philosophy in this emerald tablet, this Hermetic philosophy of Hermes Trismegistus. And that is that there's a balance. There's both. So if the world goes good and we, freedom just sweeps across the entire world, liberty sweeps across the entire world, then that's the opposite of what these people want. That's why they're fighting it so hard. That's why they're fighting it, okay? That's why the world is crazy right now, because they're fighting so hard to keep from losing the grip they have on the light versus dark, the balance of things, all right? So I don't know why I wanted to say that. This isn't even on the topic. What am I doing? I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like I got to say things. Anyway. What are we talking about now? Binding and loosing. What did I just say? All right, let's go back then to the binding and loosing. I will be perfectly honest. I don't know 100% on this one, Julie. what was Christ saying to Peter he could bind and loose on earth that would be bound or loosed in heaven? I guess the only context here is that he's going to build the church, okay? So could this be about him bringing people into the kingdom? Because if they're brought into the kingdom on earth, they're brought into the kingdom in heaven, maybe. Maybe that's a way to see this. Perhaps, some people bring this to deliverance, like demonic binding and loosing of demons. Maybe that is part of what Christ is saying here, but that's a stretch because it's not talked about at all here. The thing that's talked about is building the church and the gates of hell not prevailing against it. Now, that perhaps could be a demonic reference. There was a place at the time when he said this, and I think in the context, some people say he was standing there. There was a place called the gates of hell, and it's, I believe, in Caesarea Philippi. Is that the place they're at here? I think I've got a picture of that. Have you guys seen this? The gates of hell? Yeah, it's a literal place. Sometimes I put things in my notes and I don't take the pictures down. I need to get the pictures, man. Gates of hell, Caesarea. Yeah, this is the place. This is the place in Caesarea Philippi that's the literal, it was called the gates of hell. They had baths here in the ancient times. I don't know exactly all the practices. This is a rendering someone did where they thought it might look like. It might have had temples there. I believe it was a worship to Pan. Yeah, you're mentioning that, West Wind, Pan's Grotto. Yeah, so and a lot of people teach this, of course, about when Christ said this to Peter. The gates of hell, meaning the dark forces, the underworld, will not prevail against your work when you build my church. And so Peter, as a foundation, one of the founding people of the church, obviously he's telling him, go forth and do the things I'm telling you to do, and hell will not be able to fight against what you're doing. And so then when he says what you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, what you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven, it's just a tough passage that I really am not going to be able to go any deeper on that. See if the Greek gives me any hints whatsoever. The meaning of this word bind, deses, let's see, that's a little interesting. So bind, tie, or fasten. Impel or compel. That's interesting. In the context of building the kingdom, if you can compel or impel someone perhaps to be a part of the kingdom, then that will occur in heaven as well. I don't know. Some of these implications are interesting. So anyway, that's as far as I can really take it. There's just not much more in the passage. But it does sound to me, I will say this, it sounds like a specific command or thing that Christ was saying to Peter specifically, that, was for the time period Peter would be building the church. Okay. And again, there were so many miraculous things that Christ had already spent time with the disciples, telling them how they were going to go into all these cities and be able to essentially cast out demons and heal people and even resurrect people and all this other stuff. So, these times were special, and this was supposedly, to me, I would say, a special instruction for Peter as he went through and started building the church that Christ was giving him the command to do. So that's about as good as I can go there. Yeah. Cornelius, you say, does upon this rock mean, or is it talking about that you are the son of the living God, the rock or the foundation? Maybe, that's tough. What's this? It's 19. Let's see. Yeah, when I go to the, wait, no, what is that verse? verse 18. So let's go back there in the Greek. Just see that real quick, because I was thinking that earlier. I was like, I want to look this Petra word, or Petros. See, he says, I'll say to you now, you are Peter, Petros, and on this, the rock, Petra. Now, I'm going to look at the conjugations there. Noun, dative, feminine, singular. So that is the word for rock. And this is nominative, masculine, singular. It does seem like he's saying Peter, and then he's saying rock, even though Peter's name is kind of like rock. So, I don't get anything more from that other than what the English kind of says. I think that that's just how this verse is. It's just going to be a difficult one to say. So, you guys' guesses are as good as mine on the what is bound on earth, what is bound in heaven, loosed on earth, loosed in heaven. That's a good question. It's a tough one. Writing truth and wisdom, I like what you said. You say maybe it's because we are part of the heavenly kingdom, so as an apostle, binding things of evil on earth benefits the kingdom of God. Yeah, I think there's this connection, and that's probably what we're really seeing here. He's saying that the things you do on earth now are going to ripple into heaven. I think that may be a good way to say it. The things you do on earth, and that could be said to you or I, the things you do on earth ripple into heaven. So anyway, I just think it's a verse for more contemplation, really, is what it is. Well, that's 2 topics and 2 strikes. So let's see if I can get a 3rd strike. I can't answer any questions today. What's wrong with me? No, that's 3 topics we've done. 2 strikes. Okay. All right. Next is Annie O. You ask, can I explain in 1 Corinthians 15:29 about being baptized for the dead? Oh, man, I'm going to strike out again. This isn't fair, guys. Oh, goodness. All right. 1 Corinthians 15, let's go there, because we're going to be there for the next 2 topics. So let's go to 1 Corinthians 15, verse 29. Now, I was looking at this. I saw you post it when you posted it, Annie O. I saw it right before we started, and I started picking some verses out to try to think about, because I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this verse, honestly. It's another one. It's like I just didn't spend any time focusing on this. But it says in verse 29, 1 Corinthians 15, else what shall they do which are baptized for the dead, if the dead rise not at all? Why are they then baptized for the dead? So that is the verse, and obviously it sounds, especially in English, it sounds like, well, you're getting baptized for a dead person, in place of a dead person, or to help or save a dead person, and that immediately reminds us of Catholic teaching on, what is it, like indulgences or whatever it is. I think you can buy indulgences for your dead loved ones to get them out of purgatory, garbage, that kind of stuff. So that's what it makes us think of, and we're like, that seems so weird. Why is it there? What does it mean? And I think that it's a good question to ask. So with the context here, now I did read a little of this context because it does help a little bit. So just realize that almost all of 1 Corinthians 15 is explaining the resurrection. That's pretty much the reason this was written, this whole passage. It's all about the resurrection. It starts, I guess, he kind of starts that narrative in verse 12. If Christ be preached that he rose from the dead, how do some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? So apparently he's talking to these Corinthians, and some of them deny that there's going to be a resurrection of the dead at all. And he's calling them on it because he's like, if there's no resurrection, then Christ has not risen. That's it's antithetical to Christ, So that's the main thrust of this whole passage. There's a lot of meat in here. A lot of things are said, a lot of things that are interesting about spirituality and flesh and your afterlife bodies and the first fruits of the dead and Jesus Christ's authority structure with God and then him and then etc., etc. All this stuff is in here, but when we see this one, now just going up 2 verses, well, let's start in verse 23 and read what's being said. It gives us the help we need, I think, to at least get a better sense of this verse. But every man in his own order, meaning who will come out of Hades, who will be resurrected. Christ the firstfruits, and afterwards they that are Christ's at his coming. Then comes the end, when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to God, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and authority and power, for he must reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy that it was destroyed is Thanatos, or death. For he has put all things under his feet. But when he says all things are under him, it is manifest that he is accepted. Now, he is accepted, which did put all things under him. So this is saying, and there's a lot of words with pronouns instead of names. This is saying that God put all things under Christ. But it is obvious, it's manifest, that God is accepted, meaning that Christ is not above God, that God didn't put himself under Christ. God put everything under Christ, and God is over Christ, okay? So these verses are important to understand that authority structure. When all things shall be subdued unto him, Jesus Christ, then shall the Son also himself be subject unto him that put all things under him, that God may be all and in all. So, of course, God is going to amass everything under Christ, and then that will flow up to the Father. Else what shall they do which are baptized for the dead? Now that's our verse. In the midst of this stuff, else what shall they do which are baptized for the dead if the dead rise not at all? Why are they then baptized for the dead? And why do we stand in jeopardy every hour? I protest by your rejoicing which I have in Christ Jesus that I die daily, etc. It keeps going. I'm trying to see. I don't think there's anything else that relates to this, because it all keeps going on and on about death and resurrection, death and resurrection. So here's what I think about this verse. Now, I did look up some other passages and thoughts on this, but I'll boil it all down for you. Annie O. I think that this verse just comes out in the English to sound like a little something that it's not really intending to sound like. What I did was I dug into the verse 29 in the Greek earlier before we started, just to see what do these words really mean. I was digging into where it says baptized for the dead. Now, it's interesting. There's no questions about the words baptized or dead, and the is a participle, or it doesn't matter, article, excuse me. And then the word for is this word hyper in Greek. And so I looked that guy up because that is important. Does it really mean for? Now, the word itself has a few different meanings, which is always helpful because this shows that sometimes, okay, when you're looking at Strong's, sometimes it's that the word has all these meanings, and sometimes it's that they didn't know exactly, so that in different cases they translated it with different meanings. Do you see what I'm saying? So there were some parts of the Bible where it seemed to make sense that it meant for the sake of, and there's others where it seemed to be over or beyond or above. See, one of the usages here is the word above, okay? And so as I looked through the usages in the different verses, do you see this like in Luke 6:40 right here? It says in that passage, a pupil, and it uses this same word, is not above his teacher. A disciple is not above his master. So this word doesn't necessarily mean always for someone on behalf of, but it also kind of means above us or concerning. See this? the New American Standard translates this word concerning 3 different times in the scriptures. Okay, so there's this is one of those words that's like, it doesn't boil down perfectly to a English word like for, which is what has happened in the English. And I'm not trying to mince words, but what I think this is, because of the context we just read, the context has nothing to do with being baptized for people or doing anything for dead people. Has nothing to do with that. So, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong passage here. We're back here. What this verse, I think, has to do with is it maybe could be translated this way. Else, what shall they do which are baptized above the dead, or for the purpose of their death? To fix their death. If the dead rise not at all, why are you then baptized for dying? Okay? You're baptized above or concerning death. Now that goes with the context surrounding it. I have used the Greek as far as meaning to try to gather some meaning for the words to make sure they're right. But I think that's probably the correct understanding, that this does not have to do with baptizing yourself for other people that are already dead or on behalf of dead people. This is the same conversation as all these other things. It always has to do in this conversation with these people that didn't think they were going to be resurrected from the dead. Well, then he's saying, why are you getting baptized then? Why would you get baptized if you don't think you're going to rise from the dead? Okay. I believe that's the correct interpretation for this verse. Now, you may argue with me, but I think that that's actually right. And I actually I went to this article online. I just started searching and seeing what people were saying. Not that this is any good source, but gotquestions.org. It answered it in the same way, but not with the same kind of background I just gave you. But they came to the same conclusion. I think that is a general conclusion. It's not about baptizing yourself for somebody else. It's about, essentially, he's saying to them, well, why are you going and getting baptized if you're not going to be resurrected? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? So I hope that helps. Does that kind of answer? Let's see what we got in the comments there. Did I just do that whole segment without showing you the verses? I think I just did that whole segment without showing you guys the verses. Yeah, that stinks. Sorry, I was doing all sorts of stuff on my screen showing you the Greek and it didn't come through. My bad. I didn't turn it on. All right, let's go ahead and see what's next. We're going pretty good. What's the time? Oh, we're getting close now. Okay. Naomi Anderson, you asked, let's see if I can put this on the screen in a way that makes sense. You asked about all be changed. Why a mystery? And that's in also 1 Corinthians 15:51. Okay. So let's try to do this one rather fast. We got to get to all these things. Woo! All right. 1 Corinthians 15. We're still here, and we're talking about verse 51. Let me get down here. Okay. Okay. I say this, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, neither does corruption inherit incorruption. This is saying we can't, as physical humans in these bodies, we can't go to heaven. They are corrupt, and heaven is incorrupt. We can't mix the two. Behold, I show you a mystery. I'm showing you this. It's a mystery. We shall not sleep. We shall all be changed. That's the resurrection he's just been talking about. The whole chapter, just about since verse 12, all about the resurrection. He's trying to convince these Corinthians that are denying the resurrection, like the Sadducees did, that the resurrection's real. We will not all sleep. We will be changed. And you ask, why is it a mystery? Well, I think the reason it's a mystery, now, this is one of those things where every time that people ask me about, why is it a mystery? Why is this a mystery? The word mystery is not so mysterious. The word mystery is not as mysterious in the Greek. Now, it is the word mysterion, but that word means a secret. It's like, this was a secret, but now it's not, essentially, is what he's saying. It's a mystery. It was a mystery. And so the reason this was a mystery is because it was taught by the prophets. Okay, the resurrection was hinted at by the prophets. God had told Adam shortly after he'd sinned that he was going to redeem mankind and fix all this. Send the Redeemer. Job mentions the Redeemer in the book of Job, one of the oldest books in the Bible. There's all this knowledge of the prophetic statements about the resurrection, but it was somewhat of a mystery still. And of course, I think that might be why the Pharisees and the Sadducees kind of argued over some of these things in their heady, esoteric, religious ways. But I think that's the reason that was a mystery at this time, Naomi. A mystery that was being revealed. Okay, it was being revealed. So does that kind of, I think, answer that question? Maybe we'll just make that a short one and move forward. Yeah, Julie said someone gave the Corinthians bad info. That's right. Well, they were coming out of pagan worship, right? So they had a lot of misconceptions. The Corinthians, I think, were probably in a pretty pagan state before the missionaries from the apostles got to them, and started teaching them this stuff. So... yeah, you're right, Naomi. People do try to say rapture here. You're right. And when you first mentioned it, I thought, well, that definitely is one of those verses that's the rapture verses, right? They say that, and they say, in the moment, the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, the dead will rise, incorruptible, we shall all be changed. This was a message to those people. That's why he was talking to them about it, the resurrection. He was convincing them, you will be resurrected, okay? The whole passage is about the resurrection. So this is one of those things where I don't get why pastors taught me all my growing up. Why did they teach me this verse and not teach me the rest of this passage about resurrection? The whole thing's about resurrection. It's not about, there's no rapture here. They lied. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but they lied to me. Why did they lie? Are they just that dumb? It may be that some of the pastors are just that dumb that I was under. They didn't know. They weren't smart enough to do the research or legwork to read a few verses beforehand and see, what are they talking about here? What is this whole passage about? I don't understand it, really. I just can't. Sometimes I try not to think about that because I get bitter. I try not to wrestle with the why did people teach that way? Why did they do that? My entire life. All these things they would teach you as bona fide truth. They would teach you all these little snippets of prophecy and little things they would just pull out of everywhere and just be like, that's the truth. Why? Because, well, I heard it from the seminary, or I heard it from this guy or that guy. And I can't understand why. I can't understand why people would do that. Like, why would a pastor or a teacher try to, not be honest? Like, just dig a little bit, read it a little bit. I don't understand why. See, it makes me bitter. That's why I try not to dwell on it. Why am I here right now doing this? It's because of that. It's because of that. I want to fix that. I want to undo that which was done to me. Maybe that's part of it. Yeah, Tomcat, you're right. They're told that it's blasphemy to go against what they're being taught. So they pass down that blasphemy narrative. Like, if you disagree, you're not part of the club. You're a blasphemer. You're a heretic. And so, they go along with that narrative. It's kind of like the way Freemasons do their initiation rituals, where they make you promise on oath of death and disembowelment that you won't reveal the secrets of Freemasonry. Well, in the same way, Christianity is like, well, you either go with the doctrine or you're a heretic, blasphemer. We excommunicate you. You're not going to be able to teach if you don't teach our doctrine. So It's very similar in my opinion. I don't know. It's very, very weird. All right, let's try to go on to the next one. And MK Ryan, that is you. Why did none of the early church fathers write about living during the millennial reign? Okay. Let's see how I want to word that. Why didn't church fathers say they were in the millennium? Maybe that works. I can even fit the on there. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about this. I'm not going to pull up material on this one. The early church fathers, why didn't they write about living during the millennial reign? Well, because, well, here's, for one, they did say some things, like, and I've taught about this in some of my videos, like Polycarp and some of the others also, talking about wanting to live their lives worthy, run the race, win the prize being the ability to go to heaven and reign with the saints in heaven with Christ. That's a millennial kingdom statement. Okay, so when you see a early church father saying, I want to go to be with the saints in heaven, they're talking about the millennial reign saints. There's no other saints. Okay, they talk about saints ruling on thrones. That's the millennial kingdom. That's the reign of the saints. Okay, so MK Ryan, I guess in one sense I do see them talking about it. Now there's a few other things we can talk about in regards to this though. I think too though that if they were in it, that it's like they didn't go around saying millennium. By the way, the word millennium, that's not in the Bible. Okay, so millennium is nowhere to be found in the Bible. Okay, there's no word millennium. Okay, so we in dispensational theology, the word millennium has become so ingrained in people. We think of it as a unit. There's a millennium. I'm going to stick it into history. It's like this from here to here. Anyone in here was in the millennium, and why didn't they talk about it? That's what the dispensationalists and the premillennialists do. They're like, nobody in that period said millennium, so there was no millennium then. It must be in the future. Okay? We can't do that. That doesn't work that way. They never used the word millennium ever in any text, including the Bible. So why would we ever hear them talk about a millennium? Now, they talked about the reign of the saints, as I just said. So that's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing. They talked about that Jesus had done what he did in judgment of the Jews in 70 AD. They perfectly recognized that. Okay. They were going all over the world preaching the gospel to the Gentiles. That seems to be a part of all the things we were just reading about. So there's all these things that point to millennium, but you're not ever going to hear them use the word millennium. That's not a word. You can't find it in scripture, so they wouldn't have referenced it that way. They referenced the reign of Christ. Is that not the millennium? Now, I think, so there's that. I think that they did reference it in the ways that they would have referenced it, in the ways that they thought about it. They didn't think about it the way we think about it. So there's that. Now, the next thing I wanted to mention was I've been learning. I'm still learning a lot of things. And I'm going to bring something up on the screen and we'll talk through it real quick because this is really interesting. And I'm actually bringing the screen on this time because I keep forgetting to turn it on. All right, let me see if I can find it really quick. Let's see. This is Fox. Fox, in his book of the martyrs. So, do you know who Fox was? let's see. John Fox, 16th century English historian John Fox. He wrote Fox's Book of Martyrs is what they call his writing about all the martyrs of Christianity throughout history. Okay, he writes a compendium, the most complete one of all of Christian martyrs throughout history from the time of Christ to his time. It's amazing. It's a really good read. I haven't read the whole thing. I've read excerpts of it. But he wrote some other books too, which is really interesting. And so I wanted to bring your attention to that. So for instance, he wrote this book called Acts and Monuments. Now, he also has a view of the millennial kingdom time period and the binding and loosing of Satan that I think is interesting and we need to talk about. And I need to bring this information more to the channel, but I haven't had a chance to really distill the information. Now, I think I was first turned on to this by, I think it was someone showed me or told me about a channel, There's No Place Like Home, and this video particularly where she brought this writing up and started showing it. Fox's book, and I believe it's the Acts and Monuments book, yeah. And it shows his view that Satan was loosed in the year, according to him, he wrote in the 1600s, he said that Satan was loosed in 1324. Now you're probably wondering like, wow, that's weird. Why would he say that? Why? That's a strange date. Like, is that out of the blue? Where does this come from? And it's interesting. So Fox says this. Let's see. I don't want to go through all this too much. But you can see here in the, it's actually in the contents page of Volume 2, Book 5 of that volume, that he says these words, containing, so the Book 5 is about the years containing the last 300 years from the loosing out of Satan. And it starts in the year 1360. Okay. So he's going to then go through all these different church history things that happened from 1360 forward to his time in 1660 or so. And so someone found this in his book. It's really amazing. There it is. He thinks, obviously, that Satan was loosed in the 1300s. 13, I don't know, what did it say? 24. So it's interesting. Let's look at a couple more. Yep, so here it starts. And let's see here. I'm going to read some of this to you. Thus, having discoursed in these former books of the order and course of the years, from the first tying up of Satan unto the year of our Lord 1360, I have a little overpassed the stint of time in the scripture appointed for the loosing of him again. For it is so written in John's Apocalypse, chapter 20, that after 1,000 years, Satan, the old dragon, would be set loose again for a season, etc. For the better explanation of the which mystery, let us first consider the context of Scripture. Afterwards, let us examine the meaning of the same. At first, to recite the words of the Apocalypse, I saw an angel descending from heaven, the chain in his hand. He bound Satan until 1,000 years would be expired. And after this, he would be loosed again. And he says, by these words of Revelation, the 3 special times are to be noted. Now, this is Fox's view. I'm just exposing you to it so you can start to learn with me, because I'm learning about this. Still trying to mesh it in with what I understand. He said, first, the being abroad of Satan to deceive the world. Okay, obviously from Revelation. Secondly, his binding. And then thirdly, the loosing of him again after 1,000 years consummate for a time. Concerning the interpretation of which times I see the common opinion of many to be deceived by ignorance of history and the state of things done in the church. So he's calling out people of his time period, Christians, saying they've got the interpretation of Revelation wrong. They're ignoring history. So his views on the 1,000 years are historically based. He's writing in 1600s, okay? he says other Christians suppose that the chaining up of Satan for 1,000 years spoken in the Revelation was meant from the birth of Christ. Okay, so he's saying the prevailing viewpoint of his time in Christianity was that the 1,000 years should have been determined from Christ's birth. Okay, so around 0 AD to 1000 AD. Wherein I grant that spiritually the strength and dominion of Satan in accusing and condemning us for sin was cast down at the passion. So this is his view. He says, I agree that the spiritual strength and dominion of Satan in accusing and condemning us for sin was cast down at the passion and by the passion of Christ our Savior, and locked up not only for 1,000 years, he says, but forever and ever. So he sees that at the time of Christ, maybe including 70 AD-ish, he's saying that Christ bound up and locked up the dominion of Satan, and that was forever. And that's not talking about his binding in hell, in Hades. That he's saying that Satan was, in a sense, somewhat defeated at that time. His strength and dominion was broken by Christ, okay, forever. And then he says, albeit as touching the malicious hatred and fury of the serpent towards the outward bodies of Christ's poor saints, which is the heel of Christ, to afflict and torment the church outwardly, I judge to be meant in the revelation of John, in Revelation, not to be restrained till the ceasing of those terrible persecutions of the primitive church. Okay, now let's revisit that, because there's a lot of words there. He's saying that he felt that Satan was not physically bound in Hades until the end of the persecution of the church. Okay? At the time when it pleased God to pity the sorrowful affliction of the flock, being so long under persecution the space of 300 years, and so to assuage their griefs and torments, which is meant by the binding up of Satan, the worker of those mischiefs, understanding thereby that forasmuch as the devil, the prince of this world, had now by the death of Christ, the Son of God, lost all his power and interest against the soul of man, he should turn his furious rage and malice, which he had to Christ, against the people of Christ, which is what is meant by the heel of the seed in Genesis chapter 3. This is a very interesting testimony, a very interesting perspective on this. One that I had not seen before. I saw that in There's No Place Like Home video. I will give her credit for bringing this to my attention. But he says that Satan was intent on torturing and tormenting their outward bodies of the Christians, which should yet not be forever, but for a determined time, when it should please the Lord to bridle that malice and snaffle the power of the old serpent, and give rest to his church for a span of 1,000 years. Which time being expired, the said serpent should be suffered loose again for a certain or small time. So he goes on here, and I could put this on my website so that you guys could read it too. I went ahead and captured the pages so that I could really read through this. He goes into much detail on it. And he even tells the popes at which he thinks were the start of the binding of Satan. The popes that were in, see, he mentions Pope Boniface the 8th. Let's see what else. Honorius 3, Gregorius 9. I don't remember which one he says was in power at the time when he felt like Satan was bound. But I wanted to expose you guys to this because what this does is it does play into some of the things that I have studied. Now, you remember my Cataclysm of Rome series. Now, I started to really, that helped me focus on the years of the early church, 0 to 500 AD. One of the things that I've always struggled with a little bit since I've learned about the Roman history was, for instance, some of the popes were so wickedly evil from about the 4th and 5th century on into the 8th or so century. So evil. For instance, Justinian too, the secret history of Procopius. That stuff. Oh my goodness. So evil. It's hard for me to understand a little bit how some of those things could have happened in the time when Christ was essentially reigning and Satan is bound. Okay. So is it possible? I want to just throw this out because it's something I'm going to continue to study. And I'm going to break your heads wide open with this one. Fox's testimony here plays into what I'm about to say. But is it possible that Christ started to put down Satan? That Christ's work, the judgments of Rome were taking place in one day age from 500 BC to 500 AD. About 500 AD was the end of the Roman Empire as far as God was concerned. Christ came in the year 0, 5500 from creation. He started attacking Satan's kingdom. The Christians, the church as it built, was an attack against Satan's kingdom. A continuous attack. We talked about in the Cataclysm of Rome how there were earthquakes, pestilences, invading forces coming in and attacking Rome over and over and over again. This is God attacking Satan. That is what that is. Is it possible that Fox has a point here? Is it possible that some of the things in Revelation are related to that history? That not all of it was just wound up in 70 AD. Now, 70 AD, by the way, definitely, absolutely the fulfillments of the prophecies of Christ. The fulfillments of the Israel as a nation, the judgments upon them, all of that definitely, obviously fulfilled. But is it possible that we've unitized and kind of parameterized Revelation too much and made it something that had to be like a package and it was all boxed up and it was solved, it was unwrapped and it's over? Does Fox have a point? John Fox in his book, what is the name of this book? Acts and Monuments. Is his point here valid in a sense, and that we don't fully understand the way Revelation plays out in history and the way God attacks Satan throughout history? And that even up until 500 or so AD, God is literally waging war on Rome. And then, by the way, do you remember what I said in the Cataclysm of Rome? Do you remember the year, I believe it was 524 AD, the volcanic winter? Was this the end of the war of God on Rome? Did God wage war in such a miraculous way against the kingdom of Satan that had come from Babylon that he capstoned it with a volcanic winter, what they call a volcanic winter? It's not a volcanic winter. The entire year was dark. There was no sunlight shining in the area of the geography of Rome. Crops died. They had been had decades of pestilence. They had had earthquakes and fires and been invaded by every other country known to man. I'm just saying, when all of that is swimming around in your head, you have to start thinking, maybe I am still refining the way I understand the book of Revelation. Maybe I need refinement. Maybe I have missed some things. Maybe I have much to grapple with still. So I'm telling that to you guys now. You're the first ones to hear that stuff out of my mouth. Okay. But it's been in my head for months now, for at least a couple months, probably since the end of the Cataclysm of Rome videos. And then when I ran upon this, it helped me. It helped me break out of another box that I had in my head. And that was that some of those beginnings to some things didn't necessarily have to all coincide. They could be staggered. Some of the time periods, some of the bindings and loosings. Now, let's take for a second, and I'm probably going to end on this today, guys, because the time's getting away from me now. But just to finish this discussion, let's take for a second Fox's saying here, what he says about the loosing and the binding and loosing of Satan. Let's say he's right. Let's just play the devil's advocate here. He's right, maybe, let's say, and in 1360 or so, Satan was loosed again. And since that time, now, Fox is, by the way, his statements here actually coincide with our current chronological model. They coincide with it. And with, a little deviation, when we consider the possibilities of phantom time and things like that, Fox kind of dispels some of that here. He kind of dispels it. And I will say this, the more I read writings of the 1600s, the 1500s, the 1400s, the further I go back, I have less and less doubt that there's huge amounts of time that have been erased from history. Okay, I'm just saying that the more I've read, the less leeway I've got because of the things I have read now, the less leeway I have to say like, oh, a huge, vast swath of time was just deleted. Now, I do, I do think often about that. I still hold the opinion that our chronology is not perfect, and that there were some lies told by the papacy, especially when they were coming out of the Dark Ages, trying to regain control of the nations, the European nations, and essentially regain control of the world under the Holy Roman emperors. I think there were definitely lies told. I documented some of those in my Cataclysm of Rome series. So I do think there is some problems with chronology. However, Fox and other writers like him seem to lend credence to that we're not as far off as some people are saying. That it's not as bad as we may think it was. So there's just a lot to digest and think on there. I just thought I'd give that to you guys so you can think about it with me, because the more I've read, the more I've expanded my understanding. And I'm just saying that things like this have caused me to at least consider possibilities that I hadn't considered before. So that being said, I don't know if I answered your question perfectly there, MK Ryan, but maybe that helps a little. You asked about why the early church fathers didn't write about living in the millennial reign. Well, there's a lot of reasons that could be the case. For one, like I mentioned up front, they wouldn't have said millennium. They said things like the saints were reigning, I want to reign with the saints, etc., etc., etc. All that stuff that would have been said during the millennium, they said those things, some of them. And then the other possibility that if, like, Fox is correct in his interpretation of Revelation, that the millennium for most of those early church fathers really hadn't started. Okay, so I just think that it's worth considering those things. I hope that helps you, MK Ryan. I would just suggest that, aside from you just taking my word at these things, if you read some of the earliest church fathers, find some Ignatius, some Justin Martyr, some Irenaeus, some Tertullian, read some of those guys and see if the things they say are compatible with the millennial reign being in progress as they were speaking. That's how I approached it, and that's why I say the things that I'm saying, because it did seem compatible. All right. Well, guys, because of time, I think we're going to cut here. We're going to finish up. Now, writing truth in wisdom, I still have your topic, and perhaps we can push that to next week. We did a good job. I went through about, what did I go through, 5, 6? I went through 6 topics today. That's pretty good. But writing truth and wisdom, I still have yours. We can probably do it next week. You asked about the role of the Holy Spirit post 70 AD and the 1,000 years, being that the early church was giving power to confirm the new covenant gospel of Jesus Christ. Yeah, and that dovetails in a little with what we were just talking about, some of those things, but I'll talk more about that next week. it's kind of that whole cessation topic revisited a little bit for with updated information, I think. And then Tanda, you asked about the rest of the dead in Revelation 25, and I still didn't get to that, did I? The orphan trains and the Cabbage Patch Babies. I'm gonna say this, Tanda. Like I will bloviate a bit on that one, and what I would have done was talk about it. But I will say in the end, I don't have a ton of information on the Cabbage Patch Babies, the orphan trains. Now, what I see when I hear people talk about those things is that they connect them to this statement in Revelation 20, verse 5, the rest of the dead would not be resurrected until the end of the 1,000 years, is essentially what it sounds like it's saying, right? And so there's all sorts of conjectures that people make about that, thinking that they are the resurrected dead. But, my question would be, why would they be resurrected as babies? I don't understand that part. So that's why it's problematic. All that conjecture just causes a lot of confusion. It doesn't necessarily fit in with the scriptures because there's nothing in the scripture about it, really. It just says this one thing. And by the way, I did have someone point out to me, it might have been you, that statement in Revelation 25 in some of the older texts, manuscripts. For instance, I went straight to Sinaiticus, the Codex Sinaiticus, which is 3rd century, I believe. And that verse in the Codex Sinaiticus does not include that statement. It only has the last part of the verse, which is, "This is the first resurrection." It doesn't talk about the, quote, rest of the dead being raised at the end of the 1,000 years. It doesn't have that little section in it at all. So I'm not saying it's not valid. I'm just saying it's interesting that it doesn't exist in one of the most early texts that we have. It's very interesting. But I think I would probably not give you much more if I tried to flesh that topic out. So I'm going to probably just pretend I answered your question and say that the Cabbage Patch Babies and orphan trains, until I do some real deep dives and spend some hours on that stuff, I'm not going to have much of a good answer for where I think those things came from. I do think that particularly the orphan trains, it could have been, they could have been, well, I don't know. I don't want to say too much. I don't know, but is it related to the sanitariums, the insane asylums that they had during the time? For whatever reason, they were committing so many people to insane asylums. Were these the children that they were taking because they had committed the parents? So now we've got children. What do we do with them? Well, maybe we ship them all over the country and have people take care of them. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out. I just don't know much about it. So, yeah, I think that I'll just leave that. I'll leave that. All right. You say, MK Ryan, that as far as the thing we just did for you, you said that you think that helps. All we can do is speculate, but I appreciate your answer. Yeah, you're welcome. You said, would I be interested in doing a show with Understanding Conspiracy? I think you have a good chat. Yeah, well, I would do that probably, MK Ryan, if Understanding Conspiracy wanted to do it. Is that you? Are you Understanding Conspiracy? But yeah, no, I would be open to probably talking to almost anyone. So let me know if there's some possibility there that I don't know about. I usually don't just go out and ask people, hey, can I do an interview with you? I won't do that, but we'll see. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure as always. It's been fun. I think I've said a lot of things today. This was kind of meaty. I unloaded some things on you guys that I haven't unloaded yet. So you're welcome. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't mean, I never want to confuse people by throwing a bunch of stuff at them that, is like way out there or anything like that. So if that's what happened, please don't feel confused. As I learn and research information, it's just, it will update. It will refresh. It will refine my understandings of things, and I'll try to make sure that I do my best with that as time goes on, to be honest with you guys and show you what I'm seeing. So that's all I'm trying to do here. Thank you so much. Monique, it's good to see you there. God bless. Thank you for joining today. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate all of you. Take care. Be safe this week. And hey, email me if you get bored. Send me an email. All right. See you guys.